we've seen that we start off, according to Hobbes, with empirical premises. That is, that there's equality. Equality is everywhere. Okay, there's no state, there's no overarching structure yet. So once you look at that, just as the state of nature, we're all basically equal, and that's not a good thing because that gives rise to another kind of equality, the equality of hope. This then leads us to be, shall we say, suspicious, lacking confidence, arising that what Hobbes calls diffidence, right? The lack of confidence in our neighbors, our colleagues, and all that. This gives rise then to anticipation. I'm getting ready. I'm going to work with others to fight you, or you and I are going to work to fight people over there, etc., etc. And then eventually we factor in that without an overarching structure, nobody's going to recognize my dignity and or how wonderful I am, and I'm not going to recognize it in you either, and then you're going to be offended. So this also contributes to the growth of conflict, is that we don't value each other in this state of nature, right? It's just me, 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 me. That's how we naturally are. We're just, Hobbes has you can call it dark, you can call it whatever, but Hobbes says that human beings are basically self-interested and maximizers. We're just out to get the most that we can. We largely start with conservation, but the preservation of ourselves, but we go further. We want more stuff. So we have this sense of value, and I have mine for me, you have yours for you, and I don't naturally recognize your sense of value of you. I don't naturally value you, according to Hobbes, and you don't naturally value me. We don't naturally value each other. We value ourselves, but we can build on that. But Hobbes says you can't build on that in isolation. What it does is it causes conflict. And if you ever go watch kindergartners, you'll see that. You'll see that, how naturally, it might even be a vindication of Hobbes, when they struggle and they play, and we have to teach them to use your words and, don't hit someone and, just because they moved something and you didn't like it. So Hobbes is saying we're naturally quite violent, quite rough. And so out of this matrix, he infers that we get basically war, which in the old spelling, W-A-R-R-E. So we get this kind of war, and with no overarching power, right, to keep us all in check, right, you're going to get this war of all against all. So out of this entire sort of set of properties, empirical properties and passions, right? So you got the diffidence and this sense of value, which is a passion about yourself. Once you put all that together, you're going to get conflict. That's the fundamental way that humans will relate to each other, is this self-interested mode, going through the world and banging and crashing into other people, forming alliances, maybe on common interests. And that's a good thing that we do that. We can work with that. But what we want to do is make those alliances larger and larger and larger until we build it up into a kind of society. That's where Hobbes is going with all this. So out of this sort of rough start, Hobbes wants to create or show us how reason can get us out of this mess. Nature put us in a mess, but nature also equipped us with the ability to reason. So we have a way to get out of it. So all is not lost. We're not in hell. We're kind of in purgatory. So Hobbes then, throws in a little bit of an old-fashioned notion, and he brings in human nature. And he says, okay, so in the nature of man, he says we have three principal causes of quarrel. Again, check out the double L's and all this spelling. But also, don't forget, three principal causes. Principal. He qualifies it. He doesn't say like these are the only three, so just get those under control. No, there's more. But basically, we have three reasons why we struggle and fight. You can find a lot of this in Thucydides. Remember I said in a previous video that Hobbes translated Thucydides, the great Greek historian. He was an Athenian general and wrote a book on the Peloponnesian War, and in which he was an Athenian, as I said, and they were on the losing side. But Thucydides talks about principal causes of quarrel, and he does talk about reputation and fear. All right, so what does Hobbes say? he says we've got three principal causes in our natures. We've got competition, which is gain, which is basically which is in a way kind of conservation, right? I'm competing just to get stuff. So this sense of competition that we have. We've got this diffidence that arises, which we saw, which is this lack of confidence. So that my lack of confidence in you and yours and me, that can cause us to have quarrels and conflicts. So we compete, that can cause us to fight. We can lack confidence in each other, that can cause us to fight. And remember this one here, the sense of value. You know, I think I'm pretty important and you think you're pretty important too. And so this sense of value that we want others to recognize, which they don't naturally recognize except in themselves, this is what Hobbes calls reputation, right? So that you're trying to do this for your reputation. So this striving for glory, you know, a personal glory or whatever, or even on a smaller level, and we know how mad people get when they're not recognized or given a sense of value. So lots of philosophies and ethical systems have turned on the notion, right, revolved about or stood on the concept of human dignity, right? So Hobbes is pointing to that. We have sort of senses of dignity of ourselves, and we want others to recognize it. But sorry, if you don't have an overarching power to do that, it's not going to happen. And you may say, well, I don't need it. But Hobbes has got an answer for this. So if you look at all this system that Hobbes has set up here, starting off with the empirical claims, and then saying, well, based on that, we will infer that you get this equality of hope. Can we really observe the equality of hope? Not so much. It's an inference. So we start off in an argument, in a standard argument fashion, with our empirical premises, namely stuff we can observe, that humans, this notion of equality, we can kind of see that. But this is more theoretical. So now we're inferring, we're drawing inferences. And so eventually the final inference is shall we say, the conclusion that no overarching structure, you get this war of all against all. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second here. So let me just go down. So with this war of all against all, so everyone is fighting everyone, and war, Hobbes says, is kind of like the weather. War is not just like a battle. War is, and just like weather is not just like a single rainstorm or something. Weather is the over time. So once you factor time into conflict, you get this notion of war that Hobbes is calling out. An attractive time where the will to contend by battle is sufficiently known, and therefore the notion of time is to be considered in the nature of war as it is in the nature of weather. For as the nature of foul weather lieth not in a shower or two of rain, but an inclination thereto of many days together. So the nature of war consisteth not in actual fighting, but in the known disposition thereto. During all the time there is no assurance to the contrary. All other times are peace. So there's an ongoing disposition to war, and so this potential for violence is always there. Now Hobbes talks about this. He talks he talks about what he calls the incommodities of war. What does this do? What's the result of war? Well, Hobbes says it's just continual destruction. In other words, and it's not even really destruction, is this war here of all against all, nothing can even get going, right? Everybody's just fighting all the time, struggling against each other. So the incommodities of war, where everyone is, it says, every man is enemy to every man, the same is consequent to the time when men live without other security than what their own strength provides. Now imagine if your only security was what you did, either your own physical capabilities, mental capabilities, and maybe your friends or whatever, or your group or whatever you belong to. All your security was simply based on that. That would be an enormous burden. You'd be constantly, adjusting your security, and that would be very difficult. You couldn't build a society if everybody were in that situation, right? And so likewise today, when we talk about some people not having security, the only way that it's going to happen for them is if there's security in larger structures. And Hobbes would say, yeah, people can't do it just for themselves. You need larger structures to bring this about. So, and so what if you had this war of all against all, where everybody's an enemy to everybody else, and there's no, again, no overarching power to keep us all in check. So even the tendencies to go to war, that's perfectly justified, right? And it's in the sense that you can't say that it's wrong for anyone to defend themselves or be concerned about their own security. So morality isn't even in the story yet. So these in Commodities of War, it's like there's no place for industry because the fruit thereof, who's going to build anything? Who's going to develop anything when it's just constant battle? You can't do anything, bring in commodities, no trade, no commodities via the sea, no buildings, no instruments of moving, and removing such things as require much force, no knowledge of the face of the earth, no account of time, no arts, no letters, no society. And what is worst of all is in this war of all against all, what do we live in? We just live in fear. Just fear. You're just fearful all the time. And then Hobbes gives us this, I know it's a little odd to call it delightful, but it's a very famous expression. He says this, after this continual fear and the danger of a violent death, you're always worried about getting killed. Imagine it all the time. You're worried about getting killed. It's like you're in the food chain. Human beings are sort of magically out of the food chain. Imagine if you were, like every time you went out, you were honestly, completely terrified of being killed the minute you step out of your house. And you couldn't even build really a house. So you were always just totally fearful. What you get is the life of man under this situation is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And that last couple of words there, nasty, brutish, and short, that has been made very famous. Lots of people use that in a variety of situations. It's throughout literature. It's a common expression, nasty, brutish, and short. Well, that's Hobbes's line. I'm not sure where he got it from or if he coined it. He's a pretty good writer, so he probably came up with it. But it is solitary, poor. Don't forget those two. Solitary and poor. You're alone and you're impoverished. It's going to be a nasty existence. Brutish, and it's going to be short. And this is coming from a guy that lived over 90 years. So he had an appreciation for a long life. But you're not going to get that if you don't have some kind of overarching power to keep this nature in check.